they are focusing really, really finely on this question of Americans not being able to afford the cost of living at the moment. And you've seen in rallies from Vance and now multiple rallies from President Trump that they're trying to get on the front foot on this question. And so long as the Epstein saga rolls on, they are unable in some ways to focus on that.
Now, every Tuesday we head to the United States to find out what's happening in Washington, where Lara Spirit is our woman perennially cartwheeling through the corridors of power. Hello, Lara.
Hi, Hugo.
Seems a busy time at the moment over there. Let's start with the Epstein files. A deleted picture from the files, which appears to show Epstein's images of Donald Trump, has been re-released, apparently after it was suppressed. Remind us what happened over the weekend, Lara. Why were these images removed to begin with?
Yeah, so we had the big tranche of material that was released on Friday, albeit not the full files. We heard from Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, that they're going to be releasing hundreds of thousands they expect in the weeks ahead. They're very concerned about the victims' identities being removed. They want to make sure that they've redacted the information that is necessary, but they have come under some criticism from some who are saying that they are either too heavily redacted or they haven't released enough of the files yet. Into that, we had a particular photo, but there were 16 documents which were removed on Saturday, including, as you say, a photo featuring pictures of Donald Trump in what appeared to be Epstein's desk in his Manhattan home. Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, said yesterday on broadcast that they were looking into that. They wanted to make sure that the women in those photos were fine to be released, and that picture would be released at some point. It was just a question of whether or not it was redacted, and he was strongly denying that there was any reason the idea that Trump was in that photo had anything to do with the fact that it was taken down, saying, Trump has been very open about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein in the 90s and into the 2000s. And there'd be no reason really for them to remove this single photo to spare Trump's blushes. So for that reason, they were, I think, pretty comfortable about that. And indeed, that photo has now gone back up.
There are all kinds of allegations floating around about other photos that have been redacted or that haven't appeared yet that may involve Trump in some kind of way. Not least from Michael Wolff. Trump's biographer has been making claims along those lines over the last couple of days. How widely is it thought, how credibly is it thought that there have been things withheld in this release in order to spare the blushes of Donald Trump?
Well, Blanche said yesterday that was categorically false to say that they're not that it's clear in the legislation you can't embarrassment isn't a reason that you're able to legally withhold any of this information. That said, of course, the big question, perhaps irrespective of Trump, is the fact that there are just so many files that are still yet to be released. And we now have a big effort from Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, those two congressmen who were spearheading that Epstein Files Transparency Act through Congress, forcing the Justice Department to release those files. They're now looking to try and find Pam Bondi in something called inherent contempt. They want to fine her for every day that the full files are not released. And they're very concerned that these files are being put out on a rolling basis and not in compliance with the deadline, which was at the end of the day on Friday.
And look, aside from embarrassing revelations for all kinds of people, I mean, Bill Clinton particularly, there's been some embarrassing photos of him. There was a couple of embarrassing photos of the former Prince of Wales and so on. Are we hearing sort of major criminal revelations about who these young girls were, just how young they were and so on?
That's one of the big things. I mean, our colleague looks at this in the Times today. There is a big report on it. But I think one of the big things that Khanna and Massie are saying is that that's one of the things that is absent from these files so far, that actually I think journalists all over the US, Hugo, were primed for major revelations on Friday, a kind of big lifting of the lid on those investigations into Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking crimes over the years. There were bits of that information, but we did not have the major revelations that people were expecting. And that's one of the reasons why you see this big action now to force the full release of the files immediately.
Yeah, I mean, is there also some suggestion, or at least revelation within them, that authorities might have missed their chance to stop Epstein earlier on?
Yeah, that is definitely true. That was the kind of, on Friday, the main takeaway that actually they'd been aware of this earlier. They'd had the complaint earlier, and for that reason, I think you will see some criticism and certainly some further questions on that basis. But I think that people were expecting to see even more along those lines, or at least were expecting to see a much bigger picture. One of the big things in these files, Hugo, is not just that we don't have the full files or that they're redacted. It's often that the files that have been released are lacking in certain context, that it's quite difficult. So one of the provisions in the bill was that you should be able to search the files online. If you type, for example, Epstein into the search bar, or if you did on Friday, it came up with no results. So clearly there were questions there about how searchable this database was. And I think that's something people will be pushing to fix.
Finally on this, before we move on, Lara, is how much of a headache politically does this remain for Donald Trump? Is it diminishing or is it growing?
Well, I think one of the big questions is, if you are talking about the Epstein files, you are obviously not talking about other things. And affordability is a big question at the moment. It's kind of the defining political issue of the day here in the US. It's the big reason why the Democrats have been able to have a number of really significant election wins in recent months, particularly that mayoral race in Miami, a seat that Democrats have not held for 28 years. They are focusing really, really finely on this question of Americans not being able to afford the cost of living at the moment. And you've seen in rallies from Vance and now multiple rallies from President Trump that they're trying to get on the front foot on this question. And so long as the Epstein saga rolls on, they are unable in some ways to focus on that. I think at this point, one of the questions will be, well, if you want to move on from it, would it have been better to release the files as many as possible in one go? I think when you listen to Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, he is really, and also Pam Bondi, they're very keen to say, the legislation is clear that you cannot reveal the identities of victims. That does create a really thorny legal challenge in making sure you're redacting the appropriate information. And to a certain extent, what we saw on Saturday with those files being removed and put up shows that this is certainly a live issue, and it is going to be quite difficult for them to kind of move on from immediately. Like, this is going to last for quite some time. Yeah,
and look, apologies if I seem to suggest there were photos in there of the former Prince of Wales. I absolutely meant the former Duke of York. Little brain freeze there. Apologies. Well, I've got you, Lara. Denmark's reacted with fury after Donald Trump's named a new Greenland envoy. The Louisiana governor, Jeff Landry, has been given the voluntary role. This is being seen as an escalation of Trump's attempts to acquire the island of Greenland. We haven't heard much about this, Lara. Is this still something that Donald Trump definitely wants to do?
Well, I think this appointment signals that it's something he's definitely interested in continuing to talk about, because we know that Landry has praised the idea of taking over Greenland. It's something that's definitely causing a lot of consternation in Denmark. And also, we heard from Greenland's Prime Minister in a post on Facebook saying they'd woken up again to a new announcement from the US president. This may sound big, but it does not change anything for us. We decide our own future. And the big question, particularly given that Jeff Landry, we should say, has only been the governor of Louisiana since last year, and is continuing or intends to continue fully in that post while he takes on this voluntary envoy position. I think it's quite reasonable to ask just how much energy is going to be devoted to what would be obviously a pretty unprecedented and staggering territorial conquest.
Sorry, you're telling me he's going to be the envoy to Greenland, but doing the job from Louisiana?
Yeah, so he has said he's continuing in the job as governor of Louisiana, as I say, a job that he took over last year, and this is a voluntary position.
Wow. Okay. So, Greenland summoned the US ambassador to complain. Presumably Donald Trump doesn't care an awful lot about that.
Yeah, then the Danish foreign minister has summoned the US ambassador to Copenhagen. They're saying they're particularly upset by the support for Trump's aim of making Greenland part of the US. And obviously, as I just said, the Prime Minister of Greenland reiterating that they're going to decide their own future. So they're hoping this doesn't actually mean anything for that island of 57,000 people. But clearly, given it sort of went quiet on this issue, particularly after the visit of J.D. Vance, now that seems to have been a question that we're talking about again.
And finally, Lara, it's Christmas week. How is the president spending Christmas? Will he get to enjoy Melania Trump's slightly headache-inducing decorations of the White House, or is he heading south to Florida like a goose?
He is in Florida and he is not done working. He'll be making an announcement this afternoon alongside Pete Hegseth and the Secretary of the Navy. We don't know what that is about quite yet, but certainly he'll continue working from Florida. We know we have a kind of blueprint of how he spends Christmas in Mar-a-Lago. We know that there's a lot of golf. We know that there's that big party on New Year's Eve. Last year, of course, Elon Musk notably there, along with people like JD Vance, Ted Cruz. There's the red carpet arrivals. So I think we have a pretty good blueprint. There'll be church services at the nearby church. I'm sure you'll see greetings to US troops stationed overseas. But of course, as ever with Trump, I'm sure there'll be some surprises too.
Lara Spirit, thank you very much indeed, and a very happy Christmas to you. Good to speak to you as always.